Excellent. Welcome to Meet the Candidates, the candidate forum for Ward 2 City Councilor. I'm Michael Carlson, the chairperson of the Ward 2 Democratic Committee, and it is my honor to serve as moderator for this event. I'm joined by two candidates for Ward 2 City Councilor, the incumbent JT Scott and the challenger Stephenson Amon. The Ward 2 Democratic Committee is very proud to host this event, and we are very grateful to have the support of the Somerville Democratic City Committee, and especially for the members of the city's executive committee as we engage our community, especially during election time. Speaking of community engagement, know that this forum is not the only exciting event happening today. From 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. this evening, members of the ward, the city committee, and additional volunteers from throughout Somerville will leave voter registration forms and vote by mail information for people who have recently relocated to Somerville and have likely not yet registered to vote. Please join us for that event. Bring your mask and a smile. You'll be given a list of addresses where there are new residents of Somerville who have not yet registered to vote, and will drop off voter registration forms and information about voting in Somerville at their doors. For more information or to RSVP for that event, please click on this web link that I'm now putting into chat. Before we begin, I want to go over a little event logistics. The agenda and format for today's forum will include first a review of the ground rules for this forum, some opening statements from each candidate, the bulk of the event itself, a Q&A series based on questions and categories gathered by the Ward 2 Democratic Committee, as well as selected questions from today's viewing audience as time allows, and then finally closing statements from each candidate. Today's viewers, you, are muted and will remain muted throughout the event. If you have a technical question or would like to submit a question for the candidates, and I'll circle back to that in a minute, please use the chat function. We have a person behind the curtain. Thanks so much for your assistance. They'll be happy to answer and provide assistance as they can, and we'll capture questions for use later on in the event for the candidates. Now for the ground rules. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes apiece for opening statements, for closing statements, and to answer questions presented by the moderator. For this forum, the majority of questions presented to our candidates today were chosen in advance based on input from members of the Ward 2 Democratic Committee. The general topics of these questions were shared with the candidates, but not the specific questions. The moderator, yours truly, reserves the right to press either candidate and circle back to confirm the direct answer to a question. Now, as time allows, we'll also present selected questions posted to chat. I welcome your questions and I'm eager to see them and hear our candidates answer them. But it's likely that we won't have time to cover all of the questions presented in chat today. And not all questions may be chosen by me. For example, related questions might be combined, and questions that I can't faithfully ask to both candidates will likely be omitted. With that, let's begin by opening statements. We will begin with Stephen Amon.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for hosting this forum, Mike. I appreciate that. It's a great day to be in Somerville today and getting this opportunity to speak against JT. I'm looking forward to running for the ward. I've been excited and been doing a lot of work in the city for quite some time. So I feel like it's my moment to be running for city council. I feel like my voice is needed at the table. Obviously, with everything that's going on in Somerville, a lot of families being lost. I want to definitely save as many families as possible, keeping them in the community. Also, too, I want to help out a lot of our small businesses. Obviously, as our city develops and is heading into a new frontier, I hope that we are able to retain a lot of the businesses that was here in the beginning. Also, too, with everything that is going on with the housing, building more housing and getting developers that are able to put a 20% inclusionary rate and sticking by that, I think it's very important to, and an effective tool, making sure that we are getting the proper housing for citizens in our community. Thank you.
All right, my turn, Michael. Oh, you're muted, buddy. I couldn't hear anything from you.
It's all you, sir.
Oh, all right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm JT Scott, Ward 2 City Councilor. It's nice to see folks coming out this morning for this. I think I see more folks from outside Ward 2 than I do from in Ward 2 in the Zoom today, but I'm just glad folks get to hear from both of us today. It is wonderful to have an opportunity to hear directly from candidates. I know I wish the ward committee would have hosted a forum like this 4 years ago when I first ran. So having a choice, a clear difference in policy and approach is, I think, an incredibly valuable thing for our city, for our ward, and I think there's a clear difference here. One thing that's been really all-consuming since taking this job on is making sure that we get the voice of the community in the room. For far too long, the city has been technocratically centered. It's been driven by consultants and contracts as opposed to powered by the people who live here. And we see that in policy decisions from the executive branch. We see that from the way that our sewer and water department is understaffed. We see it from the way the DPW was understaffed. So my vision of the city is to continue doing the things I've been doing in terms of mandating 20% affordable housing and fighting for even more than that with the Union Square Neighborhood Council, but also to work for those strong community benefits that we've already been winning in these developments since I took office. It's about making sure that we build a working class that works here in Somerville, that lives here in Somerville, that takes care of the city, because I think nobody knows their block, nobody knows their neighborhood better than the folks who live in it. So I've got a lot of great ideas for what we can do in the next term to keep pushing that forward. And I'm really looking forward to talking about it today with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, JT. With that, we'll turn into the prepared questions. The first category of questions, a big topic for both of you, clearly a top priority for you both is housing affordability. And despite a host of new initiatives and a lot of progress, the overall numbers still don't look all that great. For example, Evan Horowitz, the executive director of the City of State Policy and Analysis at Tufts University, just recently released a report indicated that rent prices in Somerville and throughout Massachusetts have rebounded dramatically since a temporary drop at the onset of COVID, and are now more than 10% higher than they were in January 2019. What policies would you encourage the new mayor, and we will have a new mayor, to adopt? And how will you build support for those policies? We'll start with you, JT.
All right. Well, it's a great question, and honestly, it starts with basic tenant protections, right? Because while rent increases, whenever somebody builds something new, they get to put whatever price they want on it, and it's right next door to me. Somebody built a bunch of 2-3 bedroom units, 1 4-bedroom unit. The 2-bedroom is renting for over $3,600 a month. Now, thankfully, that's just in this new construction, but it shows how new construction isn't actually creating affordability for people in the neighborhood. Of far more concern to me are the folks who are living in places like the apartment complex on Central Street, where during the pandemic, rents were increased nearly 50%. And it displaced many, many of those tenants there because it was bought by a hedge fund and they just wanted to maximize profits there. So our eviction moratorium continues now until April, and that's great. But one of the things that has shown us is that during this pandemic time, we are able to, let's say, bend the understood order of what's allowed. And by requiring functionally just cause evictions, you have to have a very good reason to put somebody out of a house at this point. Otherwise, it's just not allowed in Somerville. I think that's showing us a roadmap for how we can move forward. So we need to make sure that we can establish just cause evictions. We need to make sure that we can establish a rent stabilization, rent control program here, because those things are going to do the fundamental first step, which is keep people in the neighborhood. And that is essential to making sure that we can build their engagement, continue to build voter turnout and engagement from the residents of this ward. In terms of overall affordability, the only path forward to that really is taking money out of, or taking housing out of private stock. And there's a couple ways to do it. We can do it through the Community Land Trust, which I was on the task force that helped create back in 2018 and just recently passed funding for. Or we can do it by using the city to create, build public housing. And I've got a plan for building public housing here in the next 2 years. I'd love to get to talk about that more, but ultimately, when you're talking about creating affordability, the only way to do that is by removing housing stock from the private market and building public housing, whether that's through a community land trust or through the city-owned property. So, do you have like a sign to show me when I'm out of time, Michael?
You're getting close. I was about to give you a sign.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. The same question, Steph, what policies would you encourage the new mayor to adopt to promote housing affordability, and how will you build support within the city council?
So obviously, housing is a very important issue. Starting off with that clearly shows the importance of it. I think that is 66% of the city are renters. So we have a large responsibility to a good majority of the city. Protecting those individuals is extremely important. We have to understand that Somerville was a working city. So now as the rents increase, a lot of those people who were working class individuals have to change careers and push forward to get that kind of wealth. Obviously, one of the things I would love to look at is rent control, trying to figure out a way to take care of our renters, but also trying to find landlords who are able to respect their tenants and understand that, you know, these are working people, and that if you have good tenants that are paying rent, to continue keeping those tenants. I think the Office of Housing Stability definitely needs to step in and help out the city and making sure that families are able to stay here. I think another important caveat is looking at Tufts University, Harvard, MIT, all those universities come in, building micro dorms so that their master's students and grad students and students that are living off campus have apartments, so that the units that are available now can be given to the families that are in Somerville and that need them. And hopefully that'll ease the rent tensions that are going on in our city.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's estimated that the Boynton Yards project will create 14 million annually for affordable housing in Somerville. If it were purely up to you, how specifically would you have those funds applied? JT.
Well, I think your numbers are actually a little bit off there, by close to an order of magnitude. The very first building in Boynton Yards, just the 101 South building, which was the result of a year and a half, almost 2 years of neighborhood meetings and work with the neighborhood council, is on the tax rolls now at a valuation of $7 million. That means annually, that's bringing in 14 million to the general fund. But in addition to that, it's also bringing in millions to the Affordable Housing Trust. It's bringing in millions to, I think, 2.5 million to the Jobs Training and Retention Trust. And it's bringing in millions of dollars to infrastructure, called the Infiltration and Inflow Fund, which works on stormwater mitigation. So that's just the first building. The fact is that Boynton Yards in whole has another 5 lab buildings right now in the pipeline. I'm hosting neighborhood meetings about them literally every week. So the amount of funds that are going to be coming in through this, some of them are already dedicated solely to affordable housing through the fees that we have assessed for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I want every dollar of that to go to actually creating public housing. And again, a great place to start with that is the Somerville Community Land Trust. But another place that we can leverage that is to take those payments into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and use that in partnership with labor unions, especially the pension funds for those labor unions, to actually create affordable housing on multiple parcels that the city already owns or that are excellent candidates for taking, let's say, vacant and underused properties and putting public housing on. You know, outside of that 14 million that goes into the general fund every year, again, with another 5 more buildings coming in there, it's an incredible boon for our city. And it's exactly what people like Wiggs Amor and the neighborhood council talked about decades ago. I mean, Wiggs Amor's been beating this drum for at least 10 years, and the neighborhood council is behind him 100% on this. We need that commercial development to balance the tax load of the city. That one lab building pays more taxes than 220 triple deckers. So we're already making progress on it, but I think the dedicated funds that we've already set aside through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a good start. I think the city's resources in the general fund need to be directed far more towards housing security, food security, and honestly, substance use treatment. But right now, we are just not funding those topics through the general fund. So I look forward with a more aggressive city council next year, and hopefully a mayor that understands the urgency of our housing problems here, to actually setting aside millions of dollars of general fund revenues and not just the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to start addressing this in the very short term.
Thank you. Steph, the same question.
Yeah, following that up, we covered a lot of things in the city already. I applaud the mayor for setting up SEC, Office of Housing Stability. I think funds should be put into those two groups. I love the 100 homes. I think it's great giving opportunities for low income, no income families to get home ownership. I think the next step that they should be looking at is maybe 300 condos. As our city develops, we know that we can help a lot of people by giving them the opportunity of home ownership. That creates wealth. That wealth then passes down to family and kids. I hope that we are able to get as many families as possible involved in a program. I think that'll be the next step, making sure that we are able to get as many people that need housing, applied for housing. I think is another issue as well. So we have a great opportunity to fix our city and help out a lot of individuals. And I hope that we take the opportunity to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
JT, how would you build consensus in the ward for your view on home affordable housing in Somerville and in our ward?
Well, I mean, I'd go about it the same way I've gone about everything, Michael. I mean, I've hosted over 150 neighborhood meetings in just the last, 3.5 years. This is the only way to get people bought in, is to bring them into the room and listen to them. And that has been really the overarching theme of my time in office. You know, it's not just holding public hearings. It's not just holding neighborhood meetings. It's not just having office hours on my front porch, literally every week for the last 4 years. It's going to meet people where they're at and asking them, what do you think about this? How can I get you involved? What is it that you need? So I don't see any difficulty, honestly, in Ward 2. Ward 2 is pretty united in terms of what we need, and very excited, honestly, about the real affordability for homeownership that the Community Land Trust offers. I mean, and not to get too far in the weeds here, but you know, if a triple decker is valued on the tax rolls at $900K and the dirt underneath it is $400K of that, well, you can have the Community Land Trust buy that dirt at $400K, and then those 3 units get split up as condos under a deed restriction, making sure they're affordable in perpetuity, and each one of those gets sold off for less than $200K. Who wants a condo here in Somerville for less than $200K? Everybody. That's true long-term affordability, and we have the mechanism for creating it. We just need to fund it. And everybody's already bought in on that, I gotta say. In terms of building public housing, like I said, it's the same thing. Just get out there and talk to the people, because there's no substitute for it. And it's what I've been doing for 4 years. Thanks.
Thank you. The same question, Steph. How would you build consensus in the ward for your view on affordable housing in Somerville and throughout Ward 2?
You build consensus through being in the community. I've done that for a long time, and I'll be great at it. I started out as a community member, reaching out, talking to families, trying to get services to them, dealing with the youth. So being in the community, being in the streets, helping the people is something I've done for quite some time. And looking forward to continue doing that, making sure that people in the ward are able to have access to any services, any help that they need. More than happy to. I think the work really starts with identifying the people at risk. And so going out there, finding those individuals, seeing what they need and trying to get them there, connected to the services. A lot of time people often fall from getting the resources that they need because they simply don't know that they exist. And so being able to educate our people in our community, I think is extremely important, and making sure that they have the best life that they can have. So I'm out here to take care of as many people as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question in terms of affordability, at least for this section. Housing security, which you have both mentioned, remains a challenge for many Somerville residents, especially renters. And Ward 2 has a greater share of renters to homeowners than the majority of Somerville's wards. Interesting statistic, the list that the city committee used when identifying new movers to the city for today's voter registration drive had more than 1,100 households that moved to Somerville in September alone. A lot of those new Somervillans are in Ward 2, and a lot of them are renting. The return of rent control ordinances, while governed by the state, continues its work through the halls of Beacon Hill. Do you support the right for local communities to enact rent control ordinances? If so, what would you have that ordinance be for our ward and for our city? If you don't support enacting local rent controls, tell us why. Steph, please.
I definitely support rent control. Being a longtime renter, president of the Mississippi Tenant Association, dealing with 1,400 tenants, families that were going through all kind of financial woes. It's extremely important that we figure out some way to retain a lot of the families in Somerville. Unfortunate how a lot of single mothers are having to work 2, 3 jobs to take care of their children. We understand the price of childcare now. So a lot of the times 2 of the jobs pay the bills, and you need to have another job just to pay for the childcare. It's extremely unfortunate. We know that people working that hard, it becomes a health risk. Also too, children need their parents in their lives. If mom and dad are working so hard to live here, oftentimes they tend to leave. So we want to keep our families in Somerville, especially people that want to stay here. Going into the renters aspect of it, a lot of those young people that move here for school are great individuals, and we want to take care of them as best as possible. Oftentimes, when they do move here, they don't get involved in the city too often. So we want to reach out to those individuals and get them into our circle. I think Somerville is an extremely inclusive city, and we want to take care of people at all levels. And I think that we have a wonderful opportunity of doing so. And I hope that the upcoming mayor and myself are able to work together on trying to change that for our city.
Thank you. JT.
Well, thanks for the question. And I think your question asked specifically about what that policy would look like, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, this is like our Congresswoman Presley says, policy is a love language. Of course, I support rent control. I've been supporting it since day one, since I started running for office, and since long before that, to be honest. And I've been working with our local representatives, with Erica Eiderhoven, with Mike Connolly, the 2 state reps that cover Ward 2, on how we can keep pushing that forward through the State House. Those relationships are incredibly important. And honestly, Rep. Eiderhoven's work with Act on Mass about building transparency in the State House really gives us a roadmap of how we can start to build statewide pressure, because it is going to take statewide pressure for us to have that local control here. So I am all in on that. But your question asked about policy, and I think that's an important point, because rent control can't fix affordability. Rent control is probably best understood as a stabilization measure. It's something that actually increases participation in local government, in just the life of the city, because 80% of our residents here are tenants, and the average tenancy is 2 years. 2 years. We see it. Nearly a third of this neighborhood turns over every year. And that is corrosive to engagement in local politics. It's corrosive to engagement even in just caring about your street and picking up the litter. So rent control absolutely needs to be in place, and it is not sufficient for creating affordability. But if we simply cap the increase in your rent to a fixed percentage, 4%, 5%, tie it to the cost of living increase, the annual metric that comes out, we could at least create some assurance that once you have a home here, you'll be able to keep it. And then we'll need to pair it with other measures like just cause eviction and other tenant protections to make sure it's a robust ecosystem of, stability, of housing stability.
Thank you, JT. Moving on to related but a slightly different development. While our ward lives amid the construction driven largely by Summer Vision, the city's comprehensive plan for 2010 to 2030, the plan for Summer Vision 2040 is already coming together. As a matter of fact, final drafts were due, according to its website, this past Friday. As a member living in our community and as the future leader of our ward, we want to know your opinion about what's working with the current plan, and more importantly, what's not working for our ward that should be a prime consideration for our future. Start with you, JT. Have you and will you support the neighborhood council and other neighborhood groups organizing for development without displacement of people over profits? Question one, yes or no? Very quick question. Thank you.
Yes.
And then tell us what's worked and what hasn't worked in Summer Vision for Ward 2.
Well, I got to tell you, Summer Vision always leaves me with a real pit in my stomach, the Summer Vision 2030, because it has some really flashy top line numbers. And it's clear that the city only cares about the numbers that will justify profits as opposed to public benefit. You know, we had a giant goal to create 130 acres of open space in that Summer Vision 2030 document that was produced nearly 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, sorry, my bad. And we're still counting acreage in Art Farm, which is literally a gravel lot right now, overpromised and underdelivered for 5 years as green space. It's actually on the city's parks map as a vibrant green space. Give me a break. We have failed in every way as a city to actually meet any of those open space goals. But for years, before I got elected, I would go to community meetings, I would go to planning board meetings, ZBA meetings, and I would hear developers tout the top line of how many housing units needed to be built in Somerville as justification for every terrible, awful, exploitive project that they wanted to push into neighborhoods, for every 2-family that they wanted to turn into 5 luxury condos, just enough to avoid the affordable housing restrictions at the time. So I am very dubious of these planning documents because I've seen how they can be misused. You know, we just had Summer Vision 2040 before the city council, and at the request of residents here in Ward 2, specifically of senior citizens that live here in Ward 2, who were completely boxed out of that process, I actually voted against recommending its approval because it has not been a document that is used to protect the residents here. And I really don't look forward to another 10 years of having a master plan document used to override the voices of the neighborhood council, to override the voices of residents, and to justify things that just aren't good for the community. We do need to make sure development happens without displacement. We do need to make sure that it benefits the community and not just enriches developers. And I don't see Summer Vision 2030 or 2040 helping us in that goal.
Thank you. Steph, first the yes or no question. Have you and will you support the Union Square Neighborhood Council and other neighborhood groups organizing for development without displacement of people over profits?
Yes.
Thank you. The question, as a member of your community and a future leader of our ward, we want to know your opinion about what's working with the current Summer Vision plan, and more importantly, what's not working for our ward and should be a prime consideration in the future.
Thank you so much. So my involvement and service to the city started with my community group. So working with community organizations is something that I've been doing for a long time. I would be extremely excited to work with community groups here in Somerville, moving forward and making sure that displacement is avoided. Obviously, with everything that's going on in the city, I apologize to JT and to anyone else who didn't understand the vision of Summer Vision 2040. As co-chair of that, we organized several meetings and involved as many people as in the community as possible. We wanted to get as many great minds together. And I think that we achieved that. And it's unfortunate that some people didn't get to see the greatness of Summer Vision 2040. I think right now, the greenways that we are building in our city, which is the bus lane, bike lane, fixing our sidewalks and adding more green, I think is steps that we've already taken and are doing great at. I understand the city was extremely uncomfortable with the bus lanes in the beginning, but understand the importance of them now. I think going forward, we want to be in a more eco-friendly city. That's why we had spent the money that we did on the green light extension, hoping that transit is used for everybody that's working outside the city. Hopefully they can park at stations to take the green line in so they can go to work. We know that 85% of the city does not work in the city, so that's unfortunate. So we want to figure out more ways of getting our city to use the T and being more environmentally friendly. I know that our carbon status, we want to be as eco-friendly as possible by 2040. And so hopefully that we are able to lower emissions in our city. We know that 78% of the traffic that drives through our city are people not stopping through here. So trying to figure out ways of combating that air pollution, I think is something that we should be looking forward to as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Development in Ward 2, the transformation of large swaths of land into massive campuses with steel and glass commercial towers, and thankfully, according to the plans, a healthy amount of green space, which you both mentioned, particularly in Union Square. With all this big development going on, tell me, Steph, how do small businesses fit into this picture?
Small businesses fit perfectly. We built the city off of small businesses, and I think that they should have nothing to worry about. We want to look for spaces in the city to accommodate them. I think setting up policies so that they get first priority on spaces in new developed land, I think would be extremely important, and taking care of our small businesses. We know that a lot of our small business owners unfortunately live outside the city. So trying to build a bridge between them, I think would be extremely important to make sure that they are able to have a voice on what's going on in the city. Hopefully that we're able to accommodate them. We know that a lot of construction had hampered them, bus lanes, a loss of parking. And so there's a couple of things that we would love to hear from them would be good so that we are able to take care of them. It wouldn't be right just to keep them out.
Great. JT, same question.
Well, this was near to my heart because I actually do own a small business here in Somerville, right here in the ward. And I'll say that there's a certain naivety about small businesses having places in these new buildings. I'll be honest with you, new businesses need old buildings. You know, the triple net rent that commercial properties are looking to charge for these ground floor spaces is right now in Union Square over $30 a square foot. And in the new buildings, it's upwards of $80 a square foot. Most small businesses, they struggle to meet anywhere from, $18 to $22 a square foot. And I'm talking about the immigrant-owned small businesses that have been the heart of Union Square for decades. Many of those are being displaced by the mayor's urban renewal plan that was authorized back in 2017. And there is no plan for how to rehome those businesses. Even if you give them a one-time assistance for relocation, they're going to use that to relocate out of this square and out of this city, because there is no place that we can rehome in these new buildings that's actually affordable for their business models. That's just the reality, right? So unless we do some very dramatic things like ensuring, similar to our inclusionary zoning, that there is a certain amount set aside through community benefits agreements for these small businesses, for these local businesses, for these immigrant-owned businesses, to have affordable rents in the ground floors of these new developments, there's not going to be a home for them, right? We also need to unlock all of the vacant property that's being land banked by commercial landlords all over the ward. I've got a list of these properties, and I actually wrote a vacant properties ordinance that would put some pressure on these landlords. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, my colleagues on the city council did not see fit to setting a high enough fee there that would actually encourage them to lease out these spaces. But I want to see a more aggressive city council actually go after those properties through the legal mechanisms that I already created to make sure that those businesses, those spaces in currently existing vacant ground floor buildings get used for local startups, because there's no shortage of people here in the ward that have a dream, that want to start a business and just need the space to do it. And those spaces aren't going to be affordable in those new lab buildings unless we do more about it. Thanks.
Thank you. JT, parking. What's your plan?
You know, it's a great question. And, you know, Steph mentioned about, you know, we don't have the kind of employment here locally that we honestly need to truly be a walkable city, right? Only 15% of Somerville's residents have jobs here in the city of Somerville. And that's because we don't have, haven't had over the last several decades, the kind of commercial centers that we did in decades past, back in the 1940s, 1950s. So we need, and we are actively in the process of creating those commercial employment centers in Boynton Yards. And there's developments already happening in Brick Bottom as well. So that whole Union Square East area is starting to work on resolving that. But, you know, as we bring mass transit to the city, as the Green Line extension starts to come online, it would be foolish to build massive parking structures right next to these transit stations. Somerville's not Alewife, right? If you build it, they will come. It's an induced demand factor. And if you create parking like that, employers are going to incentivize their employees to drive into the city. And that's the last thing we need in terms of total vehicle miles traveled, in terms of our environmental goals, in terms of our just cars on the street goals. So that's why I've been working with the neighborhood council on capping those parking maximums in those development areas. Councilor Ewan Campen and I actually just proposed a zoning amendment at our last city council meeting, reducing that. That said, there is a need for parking accessibility, right? And that is for people to have the short-term parking, whether it's for Uber delivery services, pickup and drop off, or just for people who have accessibility needs to be able to access our commercial centers, our parks, our open spaces. And that's why I've been working with the chair of our Disabilities Commission on exactly those issues. And am working on some language to put into zoning specifically to address that as it relates to our open space design. So, you know, I know parking is on everybody's mind, but ultimately we need to go to a city. We need to create a city where vehicle parking is not the sole bottleneck that we have. And that starts not just in the big projects, but even on a small project by small project basis where, you know, it's worth it to sacrifice some square footage of the building that somebody wants to put up, luxury condo building, to make sure that there is bicycle lane, wide enough sidewalk, and a drop-off spot for essential services and Uber and Lyft.
Thank you. Same question, Steph. Parking. What's the game plan?
Thank you so much. Obviously, parking is a hot topic. In a city of 90,000 in a 4x1, parking is definitely difficult. So we have to look at ways of making parking easier. I think easy access to a Somerville parking sticker might be a little bit too high. So we definitely want to lower that price. We can enable more people in the city to get those. I think we need to identify our parking spaces in our ward. There's no problem with that. We just need to just go in and look at what we have and make it more available. I think also too, with the new developers that are coming in, we need to make sure that they are building some underground parking for the size of their buildings. I think that would definitely be a great step going forward with that. It's unfortunate that we won't be looking at parking garages. I think that would be a great effective move to store a lot of cars. People don't mind walking back. As long as their car is secure, they'll walk 5 minutes, to make sure that it's, all right and not having to go through a lot of stress. It's definitely difficult having so many drivers in our city and not having enough parking. We want to accommodate for as many people as possible. Living in the Mystics for a number of years, trying to figure out the parking was extremely difficult, especially in East with the density of that city. So I see it in our ward, and I'm seeing it again in our ward over here. I spent some time in Davis, and it's obviously an issue. So parking is an issue across the city. I think that we can come together and try to figure that out as a community. Obviously, with the building of the transit systems, hopefully that would get more people to use the T instead of driving. So hopefully that will open up some avenues, but definitely trying to figure out parking in a 2-minute response is almost impossible. It's just as easy as trying to find parking in Somerville.
Thank you. Turning now to policing and public safety. Using your words, define the proper role of police in our community. What should they do and what should they not do? Steph.
Okay, so this is my first time running for city. Being a first-time candidate, I did get extremely excited in my first opportunity to speak on police relations. Obviously, I feel like the position of the police is to protect and serve. I think that in the past, the police had a different identity in the city, but unfortunately, because of their responsibility now with the amount of people in our city, their position has changed. So I think we can do better by building better connections, better rapport with our first responders. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, JT. Using your words, what's the proper role of police in our community? What should they do and what shouldn't they?
Honestly, we require our police department to do far more than they're equipped to do, and they should do. Calling the police should be and is, for many people in Ward 2, a last resort. We should have non-sworn, unarmed response mechanisms available for most of the functions the police department carries out right now. And some of that is borne out by management studies that have been done by the city dating back 20 years. We are spending far too much and putting people with far too little training for the jobs that they are being asked to do out there, and nobody's satisfied with it. It's costing us too much money, and it's causing concrete harm. To say that we need to expand the money that's directed to the police department right now is to miss the mark entirely. To say that our Somerville Police Union, the one whose president is currently indicted for the latest in a decades-long string of pepper spraying people in the face, to say that union deserves our protection, they're protecting themselves quite well, I'd say. We need to dramatically change the way policing is done in this city. And that's my personal opinion. But my personal opinion isn't as important as the opinion of the people in the ward. And that's what I have to listen to. So when approaching these questions of policing, when approaching the questions of accountability in our police department, of creating an independent review board, which I drafted the language for with Councilor Willem Bach and Councilor Lance Davis, I have to listen to the hundreds of Ward 2 residents that send me emails, that have given me phone calls, that have said, we need dramatic change in the police department. We need to reduce their role in our community, and we need to provide real public health and safety supports, because that's how we keep each other safe, by making sure everybody has the resources and security they need to thrive.
Thank you. We have two last sections. I'm being mindful of the time. In cases where candidates had run over the 2-minute mark before, I secretly noted in chat to the other candidate, you can have extra time on it in the spirit of equity. Given the constrained amount of time we have remaining for our forum, I'm going to hold you to those 2 minutes. We'll turn now our attention to COVID-19 response and 2 questions in this category. According to data compiled by Johns Hopkins and reported by the New York Times, until recently, Middlesex County reported one of the highest rates of fully vaccinated residents over age 12 in the Commonwealth, really throughout the country. But despite local efforts, vaccination rates have slowed dramatically, pretty much stalled out similarly to the rest of the nation. We've sat in Middlesex County and assumingly in Somerville at around 68% for more than a month. And we only moved recently to hit that 70% mark in the last week. JT, starting with you, how would you rate the city's ongoing response to COVID? And what policies would you encourage a new mayor to adopt, and how will you build support for those policies and practices within the city council?
Well, I mean, that's a huge question, because the COVID response isn't just vaccination rates, right? We were responding to COVID for a year before we had a vaccine available to actually put in people's arms. So if we're just talking about vaccination rates, I think we can look at the programs that have been rolling out from the incident command team and working with Summer Viva to really drive into neighborhoods to make them mobile vaccination clinics, working with local congregations and churches, because we have to recognize that there are cultural lines. When you look at vaccination rates nationwide, there's a direct correlation to how many Republican voters there are in a state versus how many people are vaccinated there. So we need to keep pushing to reach people where they're at, to convince them that it's for them, for their own good and for their neighbors' good. But I don't think COVID response is just about vaccination rates. I think it's also about how we take care of our residents. And what I saw was that the city tried, but really fell down. And when you look at how many cases there are in the city, have been in the city, where they were concentrated, we see directly how the city failed our lower income populations and our most diverse populations. So it's unfortunate. I think we need to continue to invest, again, in our Health and Human Services Department, in actual public health, because that's how we keep people safe. And we have underinvested in that department for far too long.
Thank you. Steph, same question. Anytime we talk about COVID, I just want to reach out and say my condolences to the 700,000 individuals lost during this pandemic. Obviously, it's extremely unfortunate that we have lost so many people, especially the last 100,000 individuals lost by this pandemic. That came within the time that we had the vaccines available, and they just didn't go get them. I think that we have a large responsibility in educating our citizens, our neighbors, our friends, our family. It's extremely difficult to hear when individuals do not want to get vaccinated. I think it's important that we do respect religious rights and health rights, but individuals who are able to get vaccinated, we should be pushing forward and doing that to get it done. I think that a lot of small businesses are taking on the task of making sure that their employees are vaccinated. We know that the push is for larger businesses to make sure, but I applaud the smaller businesses that are taking these steps and making sure that they're safe and the customers that they serve are safe. I think the city did as good as it could. Obviously, with the density of Somerville, COVID became very difficult to control. So I applaud the mayor and the steps that he did in trying to effectively avoid the spread as best as possible. But right now, as everything is opening up, it's difficult to really gauge on how the pandemic is going to face us. We know that Somerville is a large renter city. And just like you had said earlier, Mike, the influx of new individuals that just came into Somerville, is it fair to us as the residents that live here to not know if those individuals are vaccinated? I'm not sure, but hopefully we can come up with a way to protect our citizens that live here from the people that are coming in. Cross our fingers we're able to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mentioned that, within the last week, I look at those numbers on the New York Times in the morning. It moved from 68 to 70%. And it occurred to me that one of the things that had changed was the advent of vaccine mandates, including those enacted for city employees right here in Somerville. Do you support vaccine mandates? And answer for me that question for each cohort, for teachers, for students, and for the general public. Steph, you first.
That is a weighted question. It's really hard to respond to it. I understand making getting vaccinated mandatory, but I also do respect individuals' rights. I know that a lot of people are still weary about the vaccine, and that's perfectly fine. Yet I don't want people to feel forced into taking the vaccine, but also do know that if you don't take the vaccine, to please be as safe as possible. Try to social distance, mask up, wash up, try to stay home as much as possible. So any kind of Zoom, any kind of work that you can do from home, try to take that. I would hate to lose anybody. I mean, we're already lost enough. And so taking steps and protecting our individuals, I think is what our country is leaning towards. But I do understand the reasoning for it, and I respect that. Thank you.
Thank you. JT, do you support the advent of vaccine mandates for teachers, for students, and or for the general public?
Well, I think the general public is a different thing than those other two categories. And, honestly, I have to applaud the Somerville Educators Union, our teachers union here, and the school committee and the school department for the work they've done to create a system that does its absolute best. And we're seeing success in both buy-in rates to the testing programs at the schools and also in vaccination rates across all the different age cohorts, right? Vaccination rates at the high school were not great at the start of the year, but the simple requirement that in order to participate in all of the incredible after-school programs and sports programs that we offer here, you got to get vaccinated for that, has really driven compliance there. And that's great to see because it is good for everyone. Public education is not an option. We decided long ago as a society that it was essential. It is mandated. You have to have access to it. So, unless you're going to strap kids down when they come into school and put a shot in their arm, there's no effective mandate there. You have to create the incentives to make people want to do that. And likewise, if you have a vaccine mandate for teachers, the possibility when we're already strained on teaching staff here in the city of losing a certain number who just object is a difficult conundrum. So I appreciate the policies that the school committees put in place to actually encourage teachers to get vaccinated. And if they're not vaccinated, has stricter requirements on their personal protective equipment and more frequent testing for them. So I think they've struck a good balance there. When it comes to the general public, I can only speak for my small business. Everybody there is vaccinated. You got to show a vaccine card before you come in the building.
Thank you. Last of the sort of pre-structured question, although city councilor positions are nonpartisan roles, this is a forum hosted by and on behalf of the Democratic Party. As a Democratic leader in our community, how would you describe your future engagement with your local Democratic Party? JT, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, Michael, I've been hanging out around your living room table there for for a lot of years now. And honestly, I'd like to see the Somerville Democratic Committee, the Somerville Democratic Party, be more robust and be more active. The event that's getting hosted later today is, I think, one of the highest expressions of that, because ultimately driving turnout, getting more civic engagement. You want to talk about a vaccine mandate? I'd love a vote mandate. I'd love it to be mandatory for everybody to vote in municipal elections, right? And because that is how we're going to get everybody's voice heard. And going out there and reaching out to the people who've moved into the neighborhood in the last month since September 1st is an absolutely beautiful way, both to welcome people to the neighborhood, to let them know that there's important stuff happening here and your voice can make a difference in it. So I would love to see, I love the current chair of the Democratic Committee's efforts on voter engagement. And that happened back when she was the Ward 2 chair. I know you remember setting up a table there in Lincoln Park and doing voter registration drives. So, I'm happy to continue working with the Ward Committee, keeping folks here in Ward 2 informed about the different policy actions that are going on at City Hall and also citywide. And I would love to see the Democratic Committee here in Somerville just continue to develop, be more robust, and be a real force for inclusion, for bringing people into the conversation in a city that is so mobile.
Thank you. Steph, same question, please.
Yeah, no, nothing would really change for me. I'm in the community, I'm in the streets, I'm there with them. So I'll just be continuing on the work that I'm doing. Really toward that. And also too, and I respect people's rights. Let's be easy on how we use mandate, right? It's the nice way of forcing people to do stuff. There's mandates for snow removal and leaf removal, so when we need people to do something, we put down laws, make them do it, all right? This is not something that we want to force people to do. We want them to understand the importance of it, right? So when you want people to understand the importance of something, forcing them to do it further upsets them. So let's calm down. Let's make sure that we take care of the people that we have here. We're all neighbors. We all love Somerville and we all want to be healthy and happy. And I think that we should be taking steps in doing that. So I'll just continue the work. I think identifying a lot of the times, because we have so many new movers that come in, they might not know where their committee is or who to reach out to. So find those people as soon as they get in, make sure they're all set with services, resources for the Democratic Party, whether it's getting to meetings, getting to Zoom, stuff like that. I think is the next step that we should do in raising the awareness of our Democratic Committee in our city.
Thank you very much. I've been keeping an eye out on chat for questions from those who are viewing our candidate forum today, and one came up a couple of different times, and might be addressed in your closing statements, but what I'd like to do before we turn to those is give you a minute apiece to tell us a little bit more about yourself. We want to know sort of what brought you to Somerville. Let me just pulling three questions together as once. One moment. Tell us a little bit about your life story. What do you do for work? When do you come from the city? Steph, for you, or sorry, JT, for you, we know what your evening job is, but you mentioned you were a small business owner. For those who don't know, maybe you could list a little bit about that. But Steph, tell us your story as it relates to Somerville. 1 minute.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I just want to say how much I appreciate everybody being here today. Coming, like everybody, I'm transplanted from Somerville. I came here after a horrible accident happened to me, and Somerville saved my life. I'm so appreciative of the open arms that Somerville was. Coming here, I didn't know what I wanted to do going forth, being disabled, lost. I just fell into a great opportunity working with kids, serving the youth, and then it revolved into serving the families. And now I'm serving the city. I love my job with the city of Somerville. I had a great opportunity to meet a lot of great individuals. Working with the mayor, I'm just humbled by the outreach that has come out in this time, and meeting awesome individuals who are going to help make Somerville a great city, working with a lot of youth and making sure that we get them on an awesome pathway to careers and hopefully having wonderful lives. I think is something that I've cherished and took a lot of joy of doing. Also, but living in Somerville, I got 2 jobs. So I do a part-time job over at Marshall's as well. So I'm not shy from working.
Thank you.
Thank you.
JT, you have, because I gave a little extra time, you have
Thank
a
you.
minute and 20 seconds to tell us about your life as it relates to Somerville.
I mean, it's like Steph, right? It's a longer journey that'll fit in a minute. And you know, honestly, I've been in the Boston area for a long time. And Somerville was where my friends were, right? Every time I come in Somerville, I just felt like it was where I wanted to be. So that's why when I was looking to make a home, to build a business, to start a family, Union Square is where I wanted to be from the jump. It's been an incredible experience to organize with my neighbors here, to run a business that serves our neighbors here, and this incredible honor and privilege to serve my neighbors as their elected representative. Boy, I don't know how to summarize the amount of love and the complexity of that experience. But the fact is that, you know, I moved here, I built a business here. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a home here, and I'm raising a family here and sending my kids to school here. And I couldn't be more grateful because there's no place I'd rather be.
Thank you very much. It's now time for closing statements. I just tossed a coin. Each candidate will have 2 minutes apiece. That coin toss means that Steph, your closing statement will be first.
So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for everybody viewing. Appreciation, JT. Thank you. Mike, appreciate you hosting. Shout out to Dems for putting this on. It has been a roller coaster for me. A lot of ups and downs during this campaign. In the beginning, I almost felt like I wasn't worthy of being here. You know, and it was a tough time that happened with an organization I don't even want to bring up. But I had a lot of self-doubt, and it was the people around me who made me look at myself and say, Steph, all the stuff that you have done in this city, coaching football, coaching basketball, boards, meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings, and you feel like you're not good enough for this. And so I just had to really look at myself and say that this is me. I mean, going out there and meeting people, building connections, because I think that's what government is supposed to do. It's what I'm here. This is what I'm built to do. I am a people's person. My responsibility to this world is to make it better. Each of us is. We all have to share that goal of making our world a better place than when we left. You know, so I'm looking forward to working with a lot of people, and I really believe that if we come together as a city, that we can achieve the Somerville that we want. We can build a city that helps everyone at all levels. Take care of our youth, take care of our streets, take care of our environment. Please, Somerville, help me get in so I can make sure those things happen for our ward. And we can take steps in making our city a better place together. I hope to get your vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you. JT.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Carlson, for hosting this. Thank you for the Ward 2 folks who are here watching tonight, today, and hopefully in the future. This is going to be on YouTube, right? You know, when I ran 4 years ago, I ran because the people in the ward didn't have a voice at City Hall. I got real tired of organizing with my neighbors, marching outside, shouting from the outside in, and just getting ignored. And what we proved is that if you just go out there and you talk to your neighbors, you organize with them, you can make a difference. And the difference we've seen in terms of development, in terms of policy here in the city in the last 4 years has been truly incredible. Things that weren't even considered possible are not just on the table, they're already done. And so it is definitely about love for the neighbors. It is definitely about getting out there and seeing them, but it's also about policy. And I think that's what's great about this. What's great about Steph's participation here, right, is giving folks a choice, because there is a clear choice. We all have these shared values. The question is, what are the methods and the urgency with which we go about trying to achieve them? And so in terms of building an equitable city for all, an inclusive city for all, that's been the policy work of mine for the last 4 years with my partners at the state, at the local level here, and at the federal level. And it's work that I am excited to carry forward for the next 2 years. And I hope the people of Ward 2 see fit to send me back to keep doing that job.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I thank both candidates for participating in today's forum. It's an honor to have you here today. Thanks to all who participated by viewing this forum and for your questions and for posting to chat. This forum was recorded. It'll be made available on the SumDeb's website through the Ward 2 page. It'll also be posted on Vimeo and then communicated out through social media channels. I thank you all very much for spending the time this Sunday morning with me to meet the candidates. Once again, I encourage you to participate in the city committee's voter registration efforts. Again, the link to get more information or to RSVP for that event is now in chat. I wish you all a great Sunday, and thank you very much.